This video is understanding alpha, the measure of beating the market. And to start off, I'm going to tell a story for my embarrassment and hopefully your enjoyment. So back when I first joined the Marines, I was fresh out of IOC. All I was doing, dude, was jacking steel, eating creatine, man. I got, strong. I was in great shape. I love fighting. And if you're not in the military, this may not make total sense, but I got sent to a place called Mortar Leaders Course, full of Lance Corporals and Corporals. And if you're not in the military, there are guys much, much younger than me. List of guys much younger than me. And a couple days in, and the instructors tell us, they're like, hey, everyone's gonna get their ass kicked today. We're gonna hike like 5-6 miles, and then we're gonna have a ground fighting day. So that's all we did at IOC. So I was like, hell yeah, like I'm gonna destroy people. So we go through this thing, man, and yeah, dude, I'm throwing Lance Corporals, man, tapping people out. It was a blast. So yeah, my team went undefeated. I'm on like cloud nine, thinking I'm like, easily amateur level fighter. Right after that, I was like, oh yeah, for sure I could get in the cage, and compete at the amateur level, and so I get this in my mind after that, and over the course of the next couple of years, so I do a lot of like MMA conditioning and stuff, but I'm not sparring people. All right. And I get this idea like, hey, I want to do some amateur fights. So I start training at this Muay Thai gym here in Oceanside. And the guy that runs it's awesome, Ruben. He's a champion fighter. He's another vet, another Marine. And I start, training there and feeling like real good during the conditioning days. Right. I'm like kicking the shit out of the bags, kicking the shit out of the pads, well conditioned. And then like this light sparring day comes around. All right. And you're supposed to just like, spar lightly. And I get paired up against a 70-year-old dude. I'm like, I'm going to try not to hurt this guy. Right. And he keeps throwing this punch that I just cannot stop. Right. I can't stop it. He lands it every single time. And I'm standing there and I feel like a child. Right. It's like, I realize I'm like, dude, I only have like 4 moves. Like I have like 4 or 5 moves. And must be telegraphing because he knows exactly what I'm going to do. Like he just like stops it before I even get started. So I'm standing there and just like totally feel like a child. Right. So when I think about alpha, that's what I think about. Right. And isolation. Right. If you're looking at me, or if I'm not in that situation sparring someone else, I think I'm doing real well. Right. I think I'm, way better than I actually am. So you have to be put into a situation where you're actually benchmarked against something appropriate to what your level of performance is. So that's how I think about alpha. And it's really benchmarking the performance of whatever you're investing in against something that's appropriate. So a lot of the times in like a stock portfolio, you're going to benchmark your stock portfolio against the S&P index. Okay. So I'm just going to really quickly cover this, because you don't really need to know the math. And then I'll tell you why this is important at the end, and how you should think about it here. So, okay, here we go. All right. So yeah, I mean, you can Google the formula. Like I said, it's not super important here. It looks more confusing than it is, but I'm just going to cover it. Right. So here's alpha. And let me get you this formula. So your alpha is your actual rate of return minus the risk-free rate. I'm going to cover what that is, minus, this is basically, this would be like the market risk premium would be the S&P index minus your risk-free rate. Right. So it looks more complex than it is times beta. So let me just talk through this. All right. I don't like how they did this. So I'm going to just actually show my post real quick, because it makes it look more confusing than it is. But so the market risk premium is just this, and this is just from my post. So benchmark return minus the risk-free rate. So if you look at this is really easy. Right? It's like, it's my investment minus the risk-free rate subtracted by whatever you're benchmarking against minus the risk-free rate. So the reason why you want to subtract out the risk-free rate is that is essentially the returns you can achieve with no risk, right? So you want to, if anything other than that, there's some level of risk. So that's why you want to subtract that out to get a more accurate number, because then otherwise, you know, alpha would just be your returns minus the S&P index returns, right? That's alpha, right? It means you did better than the S&P, right? But you do want to subtract out the risk-free rate there when you do that. And typically that is going to be your 3-month treasury bill, right? Your risk-free rate. That's basically saying like, hey, the United States is probably not going to default on the treasury bill. Some of you may disagree if you're an experienced investor, but I'm not going to go there. But so that would be like 5%. And then this is usually like the S&P index if you're looking at a portfolio. Now, the only other thing you're probably like, oh, what's beta? This is a calculation of how risky your investment is, right? So I'm just going to go back to mine again. It's this part, I hope, is like really easy for you to understand, but you usually multiply what your portfolio is times beta, because it's usually more risky than whatever you're benchmarking against. And there's a way to calculate it. To simplify this though, okay, because everything I do is real estate, it has a lower beta than the S&P. Okay, so I'm just not going to use it. All right, because it would actually be less. It would mean if I'm benchmarking the funds that I do relative to the S&P, then the risk part would actually be in my favor. You know, I could even get less of a return than the S&P, and I could still create alpha because there's less beta. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be conservative. I'm just going to remove beta. So all you need to worry about is just basically like, hey, what are the returns of my fund? Minus 5%, minus whatever the S&P did over that time period, minus 5%, right? So that's an easy way if you're investing in real estate to think about and do alpha. All right, now why is this important, guys? Is yeah, so the first thing, okay, if you're looking at financial services assets, you know, like different types of insurance, annuities, a managed portfolio, all this different stuff, you're going to get a 70-page packet of bullshit. All right, you're going to get all these different metrics and numbers and all this stuff. All that matters, okay, is cash in and cash out. It's how much are you paying and when, and it's when are you getting cash back and when, okay? And I'm going to cover that in more detail in the other videos, but that is where alpha comes in, right? All you need to understand is if you have your money in a managed portfolio, they may send you some bullshit in the annual report that's like 13% or whatever. That might be pre-fees, right? They have all sorts of layers of arbitration. So just what you need to be doing, okay, with whatever you're investing in, if it's something that's managed, is just take a look at how much money you put in, what is the value, and then benchmark against what the S&P did, right? That's it, right? It's a super, super easy calculation. You don't need any of that other bullshit. Okay, so that is alpha. You want to make sure if you are in a managed fund, it is actually producing alpha. And if you watch a lot of my other videos, most don't. Okay, the 10-year average for hedge funds is 5%. It's about half of the S&P. Okay, most managed funds fail to produce alpha over the long term. And it's horrendous, right? Because there's a lot of them. But people aren't breaking it down like this, right? People aren't benchmarking what they're actually getting against the index funds. They're just looking at these reports and these random fucking numbers, excuse my language, and listening to these really smart advisors, right, with all this complex stuff and just taking it at face value. All right, so it's important to break it down. And then the second thing, guys, is what I will do for you and what I do with my funds is I benchmark what we do against other comparable funds in the space. So that's really hard. The reason why you need to be cognizant about that is because if you're going to do some real estate investing or if you're going to invest with general partners, a lot of people out there, their success was riding on the inflationary environment for the last 10 years. Okay, it's disgusting. You could have been a total idiot and made money in real estate in the last 10 years. And people are raising all these deals. I was actually, I guess, I will say it. You know, I know someone well who did a single real estate deal. Actually, I'm not going to say it in case they watch this, but anyways, there are extremely inexperienced people raising capital and pretending like they're experienced, right? So where alpha comes in is you need to be benchmarking what they're returning against comparable funds in that space, right? Because if you look at, like, if someone's like, oh, hey, yeah, we returned, you know, a 2x multiple on this multifamily deal. If you take a look at that time period, you know, let's say it was like 2017 to 2022, you would have had to been an idiot to not do that, right? So although at the surface level, they may look good, that's probably a subpar investment relative to the other comparable investments in that space. So that's why you need to be thinking about alpha. And the calculation is really easy, right? It's just, in the world of private investing, the hard part is getting access to other funds, other data. So I can provide that. And here's my ask, guys. If you're a limited partner in any deal, please, please, please contact me, because I want to benchmark what you're getting against what we provide, right? Because if you're getting something better, I promise you, I'm going to go and try to work for those people, right? I want to make sure what I'm providing is upper echelon, and it is relative to everything else I've compared about. But I would absolutely love to hear from anyone who's in deals and wants to do a comparison, right? Let's take a look and see, you know, which vendors are really providing the most value. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. And if you have comments or questions, I would love to hear them.